Even though 2020 has been an absolute roller coaster ride for the global economy, including cryptocurrency, it can be argued that the crypto industry is stronger than ever. Indeed, despite the fact that there were some significant price dives earlier in the year, crypto has made a comeback. In fact, it can be argued that certain cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, are the best performing assets so far in 2020. Recently, finance magnates spoke to Steve Ehrlich, chief executive of cryptocurrency brokerage Voyager Digital, about how the pandemic has shaped his business and the cryptocurrency industry at large, and why now may be the perfect time to get into crypto. I'm Rachel McIntosh, and this is the Finance Magnates Blockchain Podcast. First of all, Steve, it's so nice to meet you, and I'm so glad to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. I look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. So I know who you are. Can you talk a little bit about yourself and the work that you do for people who might not know?
Yeah, well, I like to call myself the gray hair in the industry, in the crypto industry, because I've been in the capital markets for 26 years now. So seen a lot of ups, downs, sideways markets, seen the craziness of the financial explosion of 2008 and 2009, the crisis, the internet boom and feast or famine in 2001, 2002 timeframe. So I've been around a long time, and now I'm in the crypto space, digital asset space. And we at Voyager deliver a crypto digital asset brokerage to retail consumers in the US to allow them to trade, 40 plus of the most popular crypto assets easily versus US dollars, and therefore also earn interest and do crypto transfers as well. So we try to make crypto simple for consumers, but give them a lot more information than what we see in some competing platforms, just to make sure that we're delivering a product to them that they're accustomed to seeing in traditional online brokerage, which is where I come from.
Right. Okay. So can you talk a little bit more specifically about who exactly are Voyager's target users and clients?
Yeah, we see the market as three different parts. We see those customers that use the exchanges, that want a deep level 2 platform, that want to see depth of liquidity, and they're really pro users. We see that as one segment. Mm-hmm. The other segment we see is the real simplistic segment that there's a few competitors in, that they give a very simple solution to buy Bitcoin, Ethereum, maybe one or two other cryptocurrencies in the US. What we try to do is service the biggest part of the market, which is those customers that have a little bit more experience than those just entering the market, delivering them the 40 coins plus, as I talked about, and making sure we deliver the widest range of services and product to the general public, to the mass market, so they can adopt crypto and start creating their own wealth off of digital and crypto assets. So we're going for the biggest size of the market, not the most active size of the market where there's the pro traders. We want the market that is the mass market, which is how the online brokers were built over the years as well.
Okay, so I want to ask you, why is cryptocurrency adoption important to you personally? What sort of led you to Voyager and to furthering adoption of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, I think it's about bringing it back to the people, and that's how I got involved. Is cryptocurrency, Bitcoin? It's not regulated by a government. There's no government, economic policy, and it's really, allows people to be the deciding factors into what currencies or what projects tend to be or will be the most successful. Right. And I think that was something that got me early on when I started really investigating Bitcoin and crypto assets and trying to figure out, how I could play a part in bringing adoption to the world. Mm-hmm. But really, why is it important is because I think we're starting to see this step away from governmental regulation around monetary policy. And I think we're seeing a lot of things at play right now, just in the U.S. when you talk about over the weekend, the president signing an executive order. Those things don't happen in cryptocurrency. And I think that's for the people to decide and not necessarily the government officials. And that's what got me excited about it.
Okay, I see. So speaking of, governmental regulation and sort of the role of the government in capital and financial markets, can you talk a little bit about, sort of what it's like to exist as an entity that, is incorporated in the United States, correct?
We are
And
strictly a U.S.
yeah,
entity. Yeah.
yes, and also primarily serves U.S. based consumers. What have the challenges been on that road, and what are there any challenges that you're currently facing in that regard?
There are always challenges. I think in a really unregulated or slightly regulated market, as we like to say, we are a publicly traded company in Canada, but all our operations are based in the U.S.,
Mm,
various locations in the U.S. And now that in COVID world, there are even more locations in the U.S. for all my employees to be working. Every home address is now an office for us. So
right, right.
uh, yeah, so it's a different world. But I think when I talk about regulation in the crypto space, it's, we're all regulated. If you're doing it properly, like we are, you're regulated under FinCEN. So we're registered money service business under FinCEN. Then you get registered in states and you work with banks and the states in a regulated capacity. I think the challenge is that a lot of individuals and consumers still don't look at that regulation the same way they look at the SEC or CFTC.
Mhm.
And so they get or even the OCC or the banking regulations. And
Right.
so I think people tend to be a little weary of trying to enter the space because they think it's unregulated. But there is regulation. We have KYC, know your customer rules we have to do, anti-money laundering procedures we have to do. We really do have to know our customers and make sure that we're abiding by all the Patriot Act rules too, as well as we have to have customer care. But then we go a step further. And with all those things, by being a public company, we have audited financial statements. We have
Mhm.
financials that are filed every quarter on the public exchange. As I said, we're public on the Canadian Securities Exchange
Mhm.
and on the US on the OTC markets. And so we go over and above. So we're a public company, audited financials, our internal controls are audited. And so customers can get really comfortable. But I think that's the biggest challenge, getting the mass public to realize that this is here to stay. It's going to change the way you live over the next 10 years. And it's time to get in, but they got to feel comfortable with regulated entities.
Right, right, exactly. And I think that's something that we're kind of seeing, uh, you know, more and more now compared to even a year ago, for example, or definitely 2 years ago.
That's right. I think that's, we're hopeful more regulation comes in the US. We're starting to see it globally as
Mhm.
more and more regulators are starting to pay attention and starting to work towards a regulatory framework that works for each and every jurisdiction. And we're hopeful that the US will get there at some point. I still unfortunately think it's a little bit further out than it probably should be.
Mhm.
But knowing that I've been in a broker dealer world for 26 years. So I think there's a lot of things to be thought through when it comes to regulation. And I think the SEC is being thoughtful about it without reacting too fast. But I'd like to see it come sooner because I think the adoption will come even quicker.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I want to ask you also about these 40 plus assets that you have on
Mhm.
Voyager. What is the listing process, for bringing on new assets?
Yeah, we have a pretty extensive, process there. I'm not going to give everything away, but we do speak to counsel. We look at liquidity across the globe. One thing to remember is that we aren't an exchange, and the fact that we connect to 10 to 12 exchanges, OTC providers, liquidity providers, market makers. We try to make sure that there's enough depth of liquidity that we can aggregate across the globe to give the customers really a chance to execute their trades without us being the sole point. The problem with an exchange, if you open an account in an exchange, you're the one sole liquidity point for that. So if the exchange happens to be offline or something happens, they run out of liquidity, you can't trade that asset anymore. So we try to go global, and we want to make sure when we're looking at all the assets that we've spoken to counsel, examine the product and the project, and feel comfortable that it abides by all the regulatory framework in place. And at the same time, give the customer a good trading and investing experience.
Absolutely. So I want to switch gears a little bit, and ask you about, sort of your thoughts on what we've touched on a little bit earlier, which is that, the fact that we're in the middle of this crazy uh, health crisis, economic crisis, and there's another stimulus check that is ostensibly on the way. So um, I want to ask you, how there's a lot of talk in the cryptocurrency space about, people using their stimulus check or, their unemployment money to invest in cryptocurrency for the first time. Um, Can you make a case for why that might be a good idea?
Well, no, the case is pretty simple. It
Yeah.
is, if you have the ability to use that money as an investment, opportunity. And
Mm,
because remember, not everybody who's getting the stimulus checks are in absolute need of those stimulus checks. I think
mm,
that's the fallacy, is that, the stimulus checks are going to people that need it to put food on the table and so forth. But there's quite a few, quite a large number of people that get stimulus checks that are still working, still have their job, still, could put food on the table for themselves and their families. So if you have it, the ability to use it as disposable income, the simple case is it's the highest performing asset in 2020. So, you should put your money into that if you want to make, if you think that the upside there is greater than some of the, the stock market and so forth. We saw a lot of that the last time around. We saw quite a few customers uh, buy more crypto, took their $600, $1,200 checks and wound up buying Bitcoin, Ethereum, Voyager token. They bought quite a few. And we think this time around they'll do the same thing. But, no rush to judgment on my side, is that the number one factor there is that you have to be able to, I wouldn't say, hey, take your $400 check and go put it into crypto if you need it to put food on the table. I
yeah.
think those people who absolutely need it for the purpose it's truly meant for, to put food on the table, should absolutely do that and not try to make more money with it. But I do think that if you have it as disposable income, it's as good of an investment. It's probably the best investment right now. And that's what we've seen. And I think there's been some data about that. I've seen on the internet, there's a Twitter account that actually follows that. And I think it's the highest performing asset since the stimulus checks have been put out and delivered to people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's kind of, I mean, I guess it's probably not totally coincidental that cryptocurrencies have really taken off in the way that they have, following all of this craziness that's been happening over the past 6 months.
Yeah, it's interesting. Look, I think we've seen it across a lot of the online brokers, whether traditional online brokerage, crypto. All of our volumes are up. Ours is up significantly since March. We're doubling and tripling our business month over month. It's amazing what's going on with our business. But I think there's something to be said about people wanting diversification of their assets. Crypto is a great diversification. Bitcoin is part of a diversification strategy. Um, and I think that's where people are starting to see that, maybe it's not the most efficient use as a payment mechanism, some of the cryptocurrencies, but it surely is a digital gold. It is a hedge against the stock market and against currencies. And we're seeing more and more people get involved in that. And I think it's not just millennials, it's older than millennials. Our average age of consumer is on the high end of what is considered a millennial. So I think you're starting to see people really flock to this because there's such uncertainty in the government. Another $1.3 trillion package, I think is what I heard today on CNBC, that $1.3 trillion is going to come into the market again by the government. That's a lot of money. I don't know how we ever get out of that debt as a country. We probably never will. And we won't in my lifetime, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, the fact is that at the moment that, like, these measures that we're taking are ostensibly, temporarily kind of keeping things together, but in the long run, there's really no telling like exactly what the effects will be.
We just don't know. I mean, I think the smartest economic minds can try to model it out, but until it happens, we won't know because we're in uncharted territories, right? I mean, no one ever thought this, what we're in today would happen. So I do think that we've got a long way to go on this, though. It doesn't seem like we're going to get that a virus is like really around the corner. And still, even if there is, it's got to get in the hands of 320 million people. So I think we have a ways to go here. And it's uncertainty that I think scares a lot of people. And
Yeah.
I think that's why crypto is just a safe haven for what's going on in the world.
Right. And I also want to ask you about this other topic that you brought up before we had our discussion today about adopting a universal digital currency in the United States. The government adopting a digital currency, and there's been some talk about this in relation to COVID, and back in the early days when they were first discussing stimulus packages, there was a brief mention of, some kind of a digital dollar, and that hasn't really come back in relation to this. But I kind of wonder about your thoughts about that. Is this something that's, number one, feasible? Would it be helpful over time? And also, is it likely that it's going to happen, and when?
I think it's probable that we'll get to at least each government having their own digital currency. I think it's likely that will happen. And I think that it's kind of necessary, and COVID has brought that out. We were already working in a digital, starting to get closer and closer to a digital monetary world where people were doing most of their transactions by debit or credit cards, or peer-to-peer in a lot of cases. And so we were getting there. And I think now the digital currency, a digital dollar, just makes all the more sense, because I don't know too many people that want to go out to their restaurant or bar or whatever and hand the bartender a $20 bill. I'm not sure the bartender wants a $20 bill anymore and would rather get paid something digitally as well. So I think we're getting closer and closer to that. I think it makes a lot of sense because you can move money faster and into people's wallets quicker than you can through the traditional ACH banking system, which tends to be 3 to 5 days. I mean, when you do a peer-to-peer, some of the peer-to-peer mechanisms, like a Venmo, you want to take the money, you can keep it in the Venmo, on your Venmo wallet, but when you send it to a friend and he wants to, or she wants to bring it into their banking account, it'll take another 3 days. There's no reason for those delays. It's your money. Money's fungible. You should be able to use it when you want to do it and not have the banks take control of your money for 2, 3, 5 days. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think by having a digital currency, we can get money to people quicker, and we can transfer money between people faster, and we can use it and spend it faster with all the fees incurred today that you have through the pipes of credit cards and debit cards. There'd be less fees. I mean, and therefore people keep more of their money. Isn't that what it is? It's our money. We should be allowed to use it, spend it, and be able to spend $1 for $1, not anything less.
Absolutely. So what would this sort of implementation look like on a practical level, in your opinion?
Oh, I think that's why I think it's many years out. I think people have to be able to either have a self-custody wallet, something like our Ethos wallet, or you let someone like Voyager hold it on your behalf as a wallet within a wallet. But people then have to start, it comes back to that adoption, right? They've got to adopt either a Voyager or your own wallet. And I think it's more apt to have the first phase of adoption being letting someone like Voyager hold that for you, because the idea of holding self-custody and your own pass keys, although it makes a lot of sense, I can't remember my PIN code to some things.
Right.
I can't, now I'm gonna have to remember a 12 character or 12 word passcode or 24. I'm not sure I can do that. So I think that's why it makes more sense for adoption to let someone like us someone like Voyager do the holding for you. And that'll start getting the adoption, and more people will then get more comfortable potentially with their own wallet, and then do more peer-to-peer transactions with that. I think we're 5+ years out, maybe longer, before that happens, but I think it's starting to happen. I think the adoption and what people feel is their money and the fungibility of that money is starting to happen.
Absolutely, yeah. It's sort of entering the public conversation in a way that it hasn't really previously.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've spoken, a lot about this too, is like having been in the broker-dealer world and spent some time, 7, 8 years at E-Trade. In the broker-dealer world, selling stocks today, if you buy a stock, you really don't get that money for 3 days. It takes 3 days to settle a purchase of a stock. You sell your stock and you get the cash. It takes 3 more days for that settlement to happen. Then if you want the money from your broker-dealer, then they got to go to the cash department and say, okay, send, Joe Smith or send Steve Ehrlich, his $5,000, and that'll take another 5 days. And there's no fungibility within that world. And I think that's where we'll get to, is that cash will be fungible. The purchase and sale of stocks and equities and options will be fungible, so that you can get your money at any time. Those things should all settle immediately. It's not, it's done electronically anyway. It should all be done immediately, and people should be able to use their funds. So if you own Apple stock and you want to go then sell it and take the cash and go buy dinner, you should be able to do that. You shouldn't have to wait 5 days to get your money. It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that's where this society's going and the world's going. And we just want to be, a part of bringing that to the world.
Definitely. And I want to ask you, do you have any thoughts on this news that came a couple of weeks ago from the officer, let me see if I can say this, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency?
Yeah, I wonder what, yeah, they put that P in there and I never learned that. I was controller, comptroller. Yeah, I think it's really good news for the industry, because I think that means the banks, a lot of the banks are going to think about getting into the crypto space as a custody solution.
Right.
And it still brings a lot of opportunity for brokers like Voyager. But at the same token, I think that their thought of some regulation and the ability for banks to do it is a good sign for the adoption phase. And I still think we're in the adoption phase. We're not in anywhere, we have not proceeded past the adoption phase. Kind of like when the internet first started. There's a while to get through the adoption phase. Remember, we started with dial-up, and that was part of the adoption, and then we got to broadband, et cetera, and started going. I still think we're really in the adoption phase. And the OCC saying banks can custody these assets, that's the beginning of the real adoption phase. And we're excited by it. I think it's just great for the industry. And I think some of the prices of the cryptos have gone up, probably on the backs of some of that as well.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you actually about your thoughts about the action that's been happening in altcoin and DeFi altcoin markets specifically. We've seen huge, doubling, tripling, quadrupling of token values, in a matter of days in some cases. And so far there have been some corrections, but there haven't been any huge market crashes. What do you think is causing this? And do you think that the market is sort of overvalued at the moment?
I don't think it's overvalued. I think I would actually argue it's undervalued, because I think we're still, talking about adoption phase. And look, we've seen it. 80% of our trading volume and purchasing power in the month of July, and it's continued into August, is non-Bitcoin. And that's because people are jumping on all these projects and these altcoins, because the thought 2 years ago was, are any of these ever going to, get to fruition and really bring something to the market that's going to be value to the market? And now I think that time has changed, and the projects that are still there that are growing are bringing some value. They haven't quite crossed that line yet to really bring true adoption for a lot of those projects, but it's getting closer. And I think people see that. And that's why I think they're undervalued, because I think there's a good handful of projects that will make lives easier, bring more efficiency into the market, efficiency into different things that they're working on. So I really think they're undervalued, because I think that more and more of these projects are going to start getting their adoption and really start flying. So I'm just bull. I'm a very big bull on the whole industry, because I just see the inefficiencies that, from spending the years in brokerage, I saw the inefficiencies there. And I think these projects are going to bring efficiencies across multiple industries.
Yeah. So do you have any thoughts, if we're sort of in the adoption phase now of cryptocurrencies and also these DeFi platforms that many of these altcoins are part of, when does that adoption phase, the sort of experimentation and entrance of new users, when do we see that really turn into something that is an ecosystem that's sustainable on its own, that's growing based on user growth rather than people sort of buying the tokens and
I think it's, like I said earlier, I think it's at least 3 years out, probably closer to 5. But I think some additional regulatory framework especially in the U.S. will help expedite that. I think the no comment on a lot of things makes it harder for people to adopt, because they don't know, and they look to somebody to give it that stamp of approval. And so I think that it is multiple years out, but you're getting slow adoption there, and you're getting people to at least look at the projects, study the projects, make decisions. Really smart institutions are taking looks at a lot of these projects and getting involved in it. I saw some good articles over the weekend from guys like Jump Capital, commenting about your crypto and their thesis and so forth. And I think, you read a lot of this and you see the institutions and how they see the world going forward, and smarter minds than mine. trying to make these, and you're like, there's a lot of value coming in the pipeline. And there, like I said, smarter minds than me are coming up with good, valid reasons to why these things are going to work in the future.
Absolutely. Steve, I want to thank you so much for your time. And before we go, do you have any announcements that you'd like to share for Voyager, or perhaps can you tell where users or listeners can find more about Voyager?
Yeah, well, they could go to investvoyager.com, find us in the App Store and the Google Play Store. All I would say is that, we've seen tremendous growth in our business over the last, 90 to 120 days, continued growth in July and August, setting all sorts of records for our business. We're so excited about what we're doing. We've got a great team, and the team around me is just so dedicated to this business. And I think that's when you have a real company, that's something that's special, when it comes with the people around you, and you enjoy working with them, even though I only get to see them on the video cam for the most time. But they're special. The team's special. The business is special. We're growing. We're just really excited about adoption and where this is going. And I think the best is still yet to come.
Steve, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, definitely.